Hello, hello. Hi, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Nice to see everyone. Hello, my friends from Brazil. Happy Friday, happy Saturday for anyone who's staying up late to watch us. Welcome to Demo Days. Today, we're going to take a look at something very practical: workflow automation, specifically how you can speed up deployments with ChatOps and GitHub automation. Today, I've got James Leha, Field Solutions Engineer, to run today's demo. And we've also got Daniel Selman, Enterprise Solutions Engineer, and he'll be in the chat to help with any questions that you might have. As always, if you find today's program useful and want to talk about how you can speed up deployments in your organization, feel free to use the QR code that I'm popping up on the screen right now in the corner to book a meeting and talk with us directly. So before I turn it over to James, I've got one question for chat. What tool do you use the most when automating your workday? With that, James, take it away.
Thanks so much, JJ. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Friday GitHub Demo Day. We do these every week, and it's always about a different topic of GitHub. Today's going to be about GitHub automation workflows, as AJ mentioned at the top. We're going to be doing this on my public GitHub repository. You can find here at this link. We'll also drop that in chat here in a second. So with this, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go through a couple different scenarios of the SCLC. Hopefully some of you find applicable, and maybe some different ways of thinking of how you can automate to just improve the quality of life of your developers and your dev processes. So right off the bat, when we're talking about development, it starts with an idea, an inception of what are we going to do? What do we need to change? So with that, there's probably a lot of different project board solutions out there you may use. Inside GitHub, we have a native project board functionality, a lightweight Kanban style board that you can set up and use to track different issues or work items or make just new items and notes. So normally I could go ahead and just make an issue and start from there, but I want to sort of define a process of how we go through this flow that's really going to start us off on this journey of modifying and creating our application today. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead to my Issues tab, and we're going to use a concept called GitHub Issues templates, something you may actually be familiar with already. There's something new though that we're going to look at today, which is actually called GitHub Issue Forms. So it's a currently new beta functionality you can try in public repositories. And with this, you can see I've actually defined not just a template, but included selectors and input fields as well. So with this, I'm actually gonna make a new feature request because for today's demo, we're actually gonna be updating our web app service. It's a Python application with a Redis backend database. It's gonna be deployed to Kubernetes cluster. And we're actually gonna update that for a bake-off service we have coming. So with this, let's go ahead and update our issue. I want to get a priority level, just values that I went ahead and selected in this issue template that I'll show you here in a second. So this is a high priority for us. Category, we actually want to change the data. We're going to submit this issue. And we see a few things happen right off the bat, right? Using the issue template functionality, we can go ahead and assign users to it, go ahead and assign labels as well. The way the issue template forms look like, if we take a look here, you used to find this in the root of your repository in the .github folder. You create a folder called issue templates, and then within using YAML, you can actually define these issue template forms.
Sorry to interrupt, James.
Go ahead.
In one level.
Oh, zoom in? Oh, great point, y'all. Let's go ahead and do that. And you let me know if we need a little bit more, guys. And I will try to also be zooming in as we're looking at additional content. So here, this issue template form. Let's look at actual raw YAML itself. It's pretty simple. You define what you like, name, title, description, labels. If you used issue templates before, pretty similar. Here though, when you define that body, that's where you can use things like dropdowns, what attributes it has, a label, and different options, or input fields, and make that required or optional as well. So now that we use this issue form, normally I had that project board we saw earlier, and I'll go ahead and add my issue to that project board. But why not let automation do it for us? So we go to my GitHub Actions tab. Here we can see a GitHub Action workflow has just ran. And GitHub Actions at a high level, it's automation with GitHub. The engine behind this is supporting both CI/CD, but really any GitHub activity you want to automate, because it's simply just running code on different runners and machines that are up there in our cloud, or you can also self-host yourself. We can see it's actually ran 1 minute ago. If we actually take a look at this, what triggered it? It was actually from an issue being opened. And let's take a look at this workflow file. It's a really simple example, and we'll get to some more complex scenarios here in a little bit. Where you can see, namely, it's once again still YAML. I'm giving it a name here at the top. I'm defining this on environment. When do I want this workflow to actually be triggered? Here, we're actually not even doing this as a pull request or a push or a merge. We're doing this whenever an issue is opened or closed or labeled. We're going ahead and setting this environment token value for our GitHub secrets using the GitHub token. This is a token you can actually have inside your workflow files. You don't have to set it as an actual secret value. It's within the context of your repo. So especially when trying to automate some things around your repository, maybe when someone makes an issue or a label or a change, you can use this GitHub token to make some of those modifications. Here we have a job that's running on an Ubuntu Cloud runner. So this is our GitHub poster runner that exists up there in the cloud, and you can point to these for different jobs that you need to run. And under each job, you're gonna have multiple steps. And here's really the power of GitHub Actions and the GitHub community, right? This uses keyword right here. Whenever we see this, we're actually gonna be referencing a GitHub action, AKA a code source artifact that someone's created for us. And thank you to this user out here for creating an action for doing just that, assigning to a project board. Reasons a couple other conditional factors here saying if the issue itself had a label that contained the value enhancement, go ahead and run. And here I'm defining what project board I wanted to point to, project board ID number 1, and what column I wanted to point to, the backlog column. So let's look and see what actually has just occurred though. We see here our feature request board was updated 3 minutes ago. Timing seems pretty close to me. And we see here the issue that opened for that feature request was automatically added to our backlog board for us. If you want to build some sort of pattern around this, right? Whenever someone closes an issue, maybe send out an alert or tag something. Whenever someone makes an issue, go ahead and add to the board automatically based on certain parameters, because then you have multiple different boards for bugs, for triaging, for feature requests. Think of those scenarios that you want to use with GitHub and GitHub Actions. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to our code tab. So we have an idea now of something we want to do, put in a feature request. Now let's actually start coding and modifying our application to accomplish this. So once again, really simple web application. It's actually an example out there from Microsoft you can find in the Microsoft documentation. It's actually down here in the README file. And what we're using here is Python, Redis, and we're actually going to deploy this to an AKS cluster. Now I could go ahead and pull my code down locally and add this in my VS Code instance, but many people have probably seen before GitHub Codespaces, which actually went GA not too long ago. And with GitHub Codespaces, let's take that development environment and put that up in the cloud. So I'm going to click this new Codespaces button. You can see my browser's just changed. It's letting me know it's going to set up a Codespace for me. So it's actually building a container to host my VS Code environment. And it's actually going to have interactability with GitHub. And it's actually going to give me those extensions and everything I'm used to working on locally. So from right here, we can see it's launching for us. We can see it's that VS Code experience many people are probably used to. And now we can also see on the left-hand side, we see extensions as well that are being populated and installed for us, including Docker, some different Python frameworks, and some additional recommended actions. I'm sure everyone's gone through that classic use case or scenario where, hey, it works on my machine, but not yours. And nothing is more of a pain than trying to figure out what framework will this be using. What tools or packages do I need to actually run the solution? With GitHub Codespace, as you can see in a matter of seconds, go and spin up the development environment that you need with your specifications. And you can actually make this even more customizable using this .dev container folder. So with this .dev container folder, you can define what sort of Docker image you want to use, set up and user parameters, additional settings as part of VS Code itself. And here are additional ports that we want to reserve for your development process. Here you can see we're going to be using port 8080 and 6379. We have some additional scripts and a Docker file. And really, that's the great part about this. Every project may be unique, but define that and have a reusable framework that everyone on your team can have and pull from. All right, now we're in our Codespaces environment. Let's actually show you what this application is doing. So I'm actually going to run some Docker commands here. Just do a Docker compose up and see what's going on. This is something I would normally do locally, right? In my environment, I probably would have Docker running, eating up a bunch of RAM and memory, which is never fun. But it's what you need in order to develop and test out containerization on your machine, right? Using my Docker compose file. Here, though, we're still in the context of my browser. We haven't even actually opened anything locally on my machine at all. And we actually see that it looks like the state is now running. We take a look here at our ports that were reserved in our definitions. We can actually see that processes are on there. One here for our database, 6379, and one here for our front end, 8080. So let's go and take a look and navigate to that URL. And we can see here, our Codespace environment that was spun up for us on port 8080 is actually showing us the web application we have. It's really simple. It's a simple voting application, if you will, right? 2 database tables here for red and blue. As you select a value, it will just enumerate for us, along with this reset filter you can use as well. So that's great. We see how the application works. We see that it's actually up and running locally. Let's go and make those changes, see them reflected once again in our Codespace, and actually deploy them and use GitHub to help us get this up into our Azure portal. All right, navigating back here to our Codespace environment, I'm actually going to go ahead and shut down these containers. I can do that here from the terminal with Control-Z or Control-C, but here I'm actually going to go ahead and just stop them using the Docker plugin that's available for VS Code and of course available for your GitHub Codespace. And I've seen some questions here in chat, some from Alan and maybe some people that are joining late. Don't worry about it. This is actually documented on the README file of this application. But at a high level, what we're going to do is we're actually going to make changes to web app based on a feature request from one of our users. And we're going to see how GitHub Actions can help you deploy that up there and run some automation for containers, creating releases, and actually working with namespaces in your AKS cluster. So now that our container has stopped, let's go and make changes to this application. First, I'm actually going to go and check out a development branch. All right, so we're on a new branch here in my Codespace. And the actual main code for this exists in this Azure Vote folder. One level deeper, there's actually this config file.cfg. So inside this is actually where the application is taking those values and instantiating the database from. So let's go ahead and update this. And let's go ahead and put in 2 values here. So I would love to get some recommendations from chat here, your favorite baked goods. Probably going to do cake and pie are my go-to, but if there's any further recommendations, happy to see and accommodate those as well. So I'll give everyone a second there in chat to see if we have any recommendations for some values. If you guys have any issues with quality and such, let us know. Trying to zoom in as much as possible. This will also be available back on demand if you need to rewatch it, and maybe it'll be better on upload sites such as YouTube. All right, so let's go ahead and go for our default values here. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and do our Docker compose, but this time let's do build. All right, so let's do Docker compose up. See what this looks like. And actually, I did see some recommendations there in chat, so I appreciate that from y'all. So let's see, we had one that's pizza. We had one that is brownie from both Alan and Jason. Appreciate that, y'all. Let's go ahead and try this again. Let's do our Docker compose build. All right, Docker compose up. All right, looks like our application is running. Let's go ahead and take a look on port 8080 once again. And we can see that reflected. Our title changed, those 2 values for our database to vote on, courtesy of chat. One additional thing that you may use quite often when you're developing and working on locally, perhaps you want to manipulate and see what the database looks like. With that, we have this NoSQL extension. Let's actually add a database connection here. Let's actually select Redis. It's going to go ahead and point us to that port, 6379. Let's go and connect, and let's actually see the tables we have available. And we actually go back here to application. Let's go and run some updates. You know, it seems like a pizza day. It is a Friday, so if everyone can enjoy that. We're actually going back here. You know, I don't think that's really fair. Pizza has such a lead, so let's go ahead and bump up brownies just a little bit. All right, we just saved those. Going back here to our Codespace, and we refresh this page. And just like that, we can see those values also reflected inside of our local dev environment, especially in terms of when you're working with data, trying to see what changes occur. Having that all in this localized instance in your browser, it removes all those barriers of what kind of machine do you have? Do you have enough RAM or memory? Do you have the right things installed on it? All those pains kind of go away when you're using a Codespace that's a repeatable environment. All right, so it looks like that is up and running for us. Let's go ahead and commit our changes. Go and stop our containers first. Let's do our git commit. Now in this case, I will do a git push, but as you can see here, it's actually not connected up to that origin yet. While this is on github.com, while it is using our GitHub Codespace, we still need to push and select that origin just as we would when we're developing locally on our machine and make a new branch. So I'm gonna go ahead and select and paste in our git push command. And start git stats just to confirm. It looks like everything's up to date with our origin on github.com. From here, I would actually probably go back to my repository, make a PR, and merge this in and start that kind of process. But if you didn't know, GitHub also has a GitHub CLI. That's just using the GH command. And that's actually something I've installed in my Codespace as well to have available to me. So with that, as you can see, there's plenty of examples of additional commands and controls you can use in order to operate and work with GitHub right from the context of your terminal. So I'm actually going to go ahead and work with PR. I'm actually going to go ahead and create one. So here we can see it's giving me some prompts, what I want the title to be. I'll set my default. I'll need a body, and here I can actually submit it right from my browser, or I can actually continue in browser and see it open up. Let's go ahead and select that middle option. You can see here, it's taking us back to our repository. It's actually on and creating us a pull request from our demo day dev branch to our main branch. Everything we did in our Codespace, from creating this branch, pushing it up there, making modifications, to now merging, has brought us all the way back here into this pull request. I'm actually using a pull request template, which you can also define inside your GitHub repository. And the reason behind that is I actually want to kind of standardize when you make a pull request, what information can you put in there? So for this first one, I'm actually going to go ahead and press the pound sign and actually just go and select that issue number 7 from earlier that we created. If there's any other related issues I want to link to, I can as well. And I just want to make additional comments or changes. Add them here. All right, so let's go ahead and create this pull request. If we scroll down, we're actually going to see some additional pieces of automation running here with GitHub Actions as part of our CI/CD checks. And while these run, I'm actually going to go ahead and assign a reviewer to this. That's me, my colleague Daniel, who's in chat and helping answer questions. Really appreciate it. And let's take some time here. Let's look at chat and see if there's any questions or updates from y'all. All right, so seeing a couple of things about GitHub Copilot that just came out. That's people are working and playing with. That's great. Seeing here someone that just joined, no problem. So Harsh, for that, we're actually doing a demo of deploying to an AKS cluster from GitHub. So we're gonna look at GitHub Actions, we're gonna look at some security scanning, and some approval mechanisms you have as well. So don't worry about it. This will also be available on demand. And this repo we're working with is also public and open source if you want to catch up there and kind of look at the source code. All right, so our pull request is running. We have a couple of status checks that are running as well. I went ahead and add Daniel as a reviewer. So once these finish up, you can take a look there for us. Let's actually just start and let's take a look at some of these because there's looks like lots going on, but it's pretty simple and consolidated as part of GitHub Action workflow files. So I'm going to go over here to my Actions tab. We can see here 2 actions have been triggered and ran about a minute ago, right? Well, for my pull request, the first one here is for my build, test, and scan action. So let's take a look at this. So this summary page is actually showing you the sort of UI visual of what's going on in your workflow file. So each of these are different jobs, and jobs can be related to each other or they can be standalone. As you can see here, build and test, they actually ran in parallel, while the build and container scan actually was reliant on both of these to pass first before it would run. Let's actually now take a look at that workflow file for our build, test, and scan. The first thing you're going to notice here is that on section is actually our trigger. Previously, we triggered this for a issue being opened, right? This is a part of that automation. We did to our project board. Right here, though, we're actually triggering this as part of a pull request to our main branch. Under GitHub Action, you have 1 or more jobs. Each of those jobs, you're going to give it a name, and you're going to determine where do you want that job to run, on what type of machine, either in our cloud, the GitHub host, or on a self-hosted machine that you can have on premises, locally. Doesn't matter to us. You just connect that up, and that can be used for workflow run references of GitHub Actions. But here, I'm just using an Ubuntu latest runner. I'm actually using a matrix strategy. So it's something you can define inside of GitHub Action. And it's really great for you want to test multiple programming languages or multiple different tests or use cases. Define this array here of 3.7 and 3.8. That's actually what's making our job run 2 separate versions, as you can see here, for build and test 3.7, and 3.8. Navigating back here, let's look at our step section. We'd have one more steps. In each of these steps, when you see this uses, that's actually referencing a GitHub action out there in our GitHub action marketplace. Nearly 10,000 actions from our community that GitHub develops, as well as our ecosystem partners such as Azure that we're going to take a look at in a little bit. Here though, we're checking our source code, we're actually setting to Python. And here we're actually saying which versions of Python we want to from that matrix definition up top. I'm actually going to go ahead and install any dependencies we have and actually go ahead and run Flake 8. Go ahead and run some of my test files with PyTest. After that job, we also have this lint job. And that's where we're actually going to be using some other open source actions from our community to actually run our Flake 8 linter. So this job is running in parallel with my build and test job. Scrolling down here, we then have our build scan image job. As you can see, this is also running on an Ubuntu Cloud Hosted runner, but this one actually has an additional parameter called needs, where the lint job and the build test job have to pass before this will actually run. Makes sense because I don't want to waste compute resources if something fails as part of my testing, right? This build and scan container, it's actually scanning our container image using an Azure action for container scan. And we're going to look for any known vulnerabilities in our container image itself. All right, so that was one workflow file run that we had here. And going back, we also had a second one, and this one's actually for CodeQL. So CodeQL is GitHub's proprietary code scanning technology that actually scans your code as data. And it does this at a high level by making a database representation of your code, seeing how your code is built, and then performing what we call CodeQL analysis. That QL is actually referring to queries that we have for the programming language we support. And as those run, they're going to find any vulnerabilities inside of your database based on definitions that we're adding to all the time. The reason we're using queries to do this is because as with a SQL query, right, you get a result set back from your database. The same thing here when you're looking for vulnerabilities. So it helps you find variations of vulnerabilities. And this is just code. It's actually code that is open source. So if you want to write your own queries, you can. If you want to contribute back to our community, you can as well. And that's actually something you can look at and see on github.com/GitHub under CodeQL. That's our CodeQL database of different queries that we're adding to every day. As you can see, we're actually getting a bunch of collaboration from our community with over 5,000 plus pull requests closed and a few hundred open right now. All right, so just looking through there, we had our pull request, building and testing validation, scanning the container image, and also just scanning our application, right? I told you it's a Python app. We want to make sure it's secured. And now looking at pull requests again, we can actually see all of our status checks have passed. That's great. And we actually defined some of these to be required status checks as part of our branch protections inside of GitHub. So with that, it looks like those have been checked up in there. One thing you're probably wondering is, why didn't we go ahead and deploy somewhere? Excuse me. That could have been definitely part of our build and test and scan. Could just add a deploy job into it. But I actually want to give some flexibility to when we decide to do deployments. And that's what this section here talking about review lab deployments is all about. So whenever we want to make deployments into our environment, we can actually use this keyword as part of an issue comment here in our PR. Now, I can do this right from GitHub UI, but why not take this chance to show you an additional extensible option with GitHub and really this whole ChatOps flavor as part of our title. Now, if I go over here, I actually have the Microsoft Teams extension for GitHub installed. So what it's doing is actually feeding in content and subscribing to a feed of information coming from GitHub, whether it be whenever I create a new issue, as I did earlier at the top of the call, whenever a pull request is opened, for instance. From here, I can also comment in and make changes that will be reflected inside of our pull requests on github.com. So I'm actually going to just go ahead and use this keyword that we've defined here for making a review environment for AKS. I'm going to submit this. And now, go back to github.com. Let's refresh. Scroll down to our pull request. We actually see, hey, I made a comment here for Microsoft Teams. Use that GitHub and Microsoft Teams integration. Once again, part of the README file here, you'll find a reference to that if you want to take a look and try it out for yourself. Let's scroll up. What does it actually do though when we say you're making a review environment? How's it going to benefit us? Let's go take a look at our GitHub Actions. we actually see a GitHub action ran about 25 seconds ago from an issue comment event. Let's take a look at this. We can see we have 2 jobs here. And let's see how those are actually defined in our workflow file. So as before, we see the on section. This time we're triggering this on an issue comment being made. You can also define certain environment file variables inside of your workflow file. And here we're defining our cluster name and resource group name. And these are actually coming from GitHub secrets that you define in your repository. Down here we have multiple jobs. The first one is the ChatOps. This is where I'm actually validating and verifying my trigger message. So here I'm saying if this keyword is found, go to continue, and then go ahead and extract that string afterwards, which is the specific namespace I want to call it. Scroll down a little more, we're getting the pull request reference, just make sure we're pointing at the right place, point at the right code. And then our build and deploy job is actually going to go ahead and take that namespace value from our previous step, using some GitHub Actions syntax, right? But just understand, since this is all in the context of a workflow file, you would actually pass values through jobs, especially if they're dependent upon each other. Going down here, some more pieces of automation with GitHub Actions. We're checking our code. We're actually going to log into the GitHub container registry to store these images. And we're doing that using my user account, so my actor, and using the GitHub secret for our GitHub workflow run. Scroll down a little bit more. We're going to use a couple of other actions from Docker and Azure. And here we're actually going to be deploying to our AKS cluster. That's where I'm providing actually my Azure service principal. That's also a GitHub secret, the resource group name and cluster name. When we scroll down here, it's actually going to create us a namespace, create a deployment for us, and go ahead and do that deployment itself. And there's a lot of obviously some scripting running in here and running things with kubectl. But just understand, things you want to do with your CI/CD or really just part of your software development, you can more or less put that inside of a GitHub action pretty simply and have a repeatable pattern that you, the people within your company or team can use. There's 2 things I want to point out though. I'm actually going to make a comment inside of my pull request because I just want to update things that are in a readable way for everyone to know. Hey, did we do something successfully or did something fail? So here, an additional condition we have for our step is if everything was successful previously, go ahead and run this. So here we're actually using a GitHub script to actually go ahead and post and update a comment inside of our PR. Conversely, if it fails, same thing. I want to know why it failed. I want to give you that information that we can use to go trace through and debug that. All right. It looks though we're lucky and nothing has failed. Seeing green checks here. Let's go into a pull request. Scroll down just a little bit. We can see first, Daniel approved these changes for us earlier. Appreciate that. We made our team comments earlier here. That went ahead and triggered. And that comment we were just talking about, let us know that the AKS deployment is successful. The namespace that was created. So dev review 1 PR8. And the image being used as well. We just scroll down here, we can see this new updated area saying that a branch was successfully deployed. I'm going to click in here. We actually click view deployment. We can actually see, hey, those are the changes we made from our GitHub Codespace, right? That was in the browser, but still local to our development environment in the browser. It's now up there in a publicly accessible IP address. Just to verify this works. Looks good. And just to verify what's going on in the Azure side of things, because I know a lot of smoke and mirrors can occur during demos, but let's look at our Azure portal just real quick to understand. Here, my Azure portal, I'll go to my resource groups, add one here for demo days, for my demo test environment cluster. And here's 200 namespaces. And we should actually see that namespace for dev review 1 PR8 that was created about 3 minutes ago. That seems to line up to me. All right. We did a lot there in the context of the PR. So let's go ahead and actually merge in this pull request and see the rest of the automation when it comes to flowing this through. So we go ahead and merge this. Thanks to our approval from Daniel and our status checks passing. Let's scroll back up and let's look at GitHub Actions tab once again. And let's see what's available there. So the first thing we can note is actually 3 different actions are kicking off and running all around the same time, right? Some from a commit, some from a pull request itself. The first one I want to note is we see CodeQL is actually running again. And that's actually by design if you want it to be done that way. But it's not a workflow file for CodeQL. we actually are saying, hey, run this on any pushes to the main branch as well as any pull requests against the main branch. And some logic here for the CodeQL workflow file. It's quite simple. It's just a couple extra lines you actually put in about when to check out your code. You then initialize the CodeQL technology, choose what languages you want to scan for. In our case, it's just Python, but we're still using that matrix strategy in case we have maybe a large project of multiple languages. We're going to go ahead and build that code, and then we're going to perform our CodeQL analysis. The cool thing about this is if you have GitHub Advanced Security, or if you're using a public repository, you can actually set these up right from your security tab. So we have code scan alerts. If I actually want to add more scanning tools, we can actually take a look and see the available options. CodeQL is our technology that GitHub develops. We add to all the time for our security team, but there are additional tools from the marketplace, from free and open source projects, maybe container scanners, API scanners, or additional infrastructure as code, or other tools out there maybe you have use case for. And we actually recently added StackHawk, which is a DAS solution for dynamic app security testing. Maybe I should just want to set up a CodeQL workflow, for example. You just click this button. And right there, it fills it out with really the information you need to get started. From the triggers to the job itself, to different steps inside of that workflow file. All right, going back here, let's look at our other workflow files that also ran. The first one we see is actually our cleanup PR. So this is something because inside our pull request, as you saw, we made multiple comments in there, as we did for Microsoft Teams early, that actually triggered this off as successful deployment for us. But we might do that multiple times. I don't want to eat up all those resources in my AKS cluster and possibly not have room for other people to do deployments. So after a pull request is closed, I'm actually going to run this action. And what this action is doing is I'm running on pull request close against the main branch. I'm grabbing that cluster name, that resource group name. Inside here, it's actually going to extract the value from our environment. It's going to go ahead and run our kubectl delete command to actually delete that namespace for us. And once it's done, it's actually going to let us know things have been cleaned up, or let us know some failure happened actually as part of the cleanup. So let's actually go back to the pull request. And let's just take a look and validate. This is pull request we opened today. We worked on earlier. It looks like, hey, our PR cleanup was successful. And we actually look at our Azure resource group. Let's actually do a refresh. I know that was real quick, but hopefully you saw that dev review environment for PR8. It's no longer there. It was gone ahead and we deleted that using our GitHub action. All right. So looking at workflow runs here, we have one here for actually our staging and production deployment. We did everything inside of GitHub Codespaces from that initial issue that we opened up. We put into a PR, we made a review environment, we ran our different security scans against it, built a test against it. So now it's actually deployed up to our primary staging and prod environments. So opening this GitHub action right here, let's just talk about this GitHub workflow run real quick. So what's going on here? So firstly, we're actually going to be building our image for our GitHub container registry, GHCR. We're going to deploy to a staging environment. We then have a job to validate the staging environment. Next, we're actually going to create a pre-release inside of GitHub. So releases are something that just package up the code in your project based on a SHA or commit or a branch. We're then going to deploy this to production and validate production. So the first things that happen here, actually, when looking at the workflow file itself, once again, that on section where we have multiple different triggers in here, and we're even using paths ignore, because there may be some cases where if someone modifies a workflow file, I don't want to go through that entire CI/CD process again. It's just a workflow file. It's not actual code being changed. That's what I'm specifying here, making changes in my .github folder. Scroll down, once again, using those environment variables for different environments inside of GitHub. We have a job here for that build image GCR. Here we're deploying to our staging. One key thing to know, we're actually defining the environment of staging and its URL inside of our workflow here. GitHub environments, which is something we're going to take a look at, they allow you to break apart, specify, and put rules around what jobs can occur as part of an action and what can they access. And perhaps who can approve them. Really important if perhaps you want to gate and protect your pre-prod or prod environments, right? And scroll down here, there's a lot more logic, but really similar to what we did earlier when we were deploying to AKS, right? Create a namespace or validate a namespace exists, point to a secret and container registry IDs. We're going to deploy to AKS, and here we have a job for validating staging. A lot of these jobs you could probably truncate and have just as one, but here I just wanted to show one, the visualization, so that process flow that goes through. And this is another action for our community where I'm just going to check the health of that URL. And here I'm saying how many max attempts going to have and what's the retry time, just to make sure that that AKS namespace is up and running and it's live. All right, so going back here to our workflow file, taking a look, staging was deployed to. Let's actually click on this URL. All right, this seems to check out. It seems to be consistent with what we did earlier. Our bake-off means brownie and pizza. All right, and what does that actually look like across GitHub? If I just scroll down here, we can see inside of our environments, we actually have one for staging as well, where it's actually denoted and it's tracked right throughout the process as we're deploying or making changes here throughout the day. And here we can see the latest deployment was made 5 minutes ago. Once again, we can view the deployment from here and see our environment. Next, let's go to settings and actually see what you can customize and configure when it comes to environments. For here under settings, we can see first we have our GitHub secrets, which you can define. And we actually defined 4 of them earlier. For AKS cluster name, our resource group name, our service principal. And this is actually for making some modifications to our environment as one of our workflows of cleaning it up. And under the environments itself, you can see we have 2 environments. One's for staging. As you can see, there's no protection rules. And one here is for production. And you can see I've actually specified a few different things. Firstly, I've said, who do I want to be a required reviewer before that workflow can actually run? And how long should the wait timer be before the workflow itself should deploy? In case you want to add maybe 30 minutes, an hour, or several hours, you can define that right here. Next down here, we're actually talking about our protected branches. And can this be deployed from anywhere or should it be a protected branch? Here we're seeing a protected branch, which will apply to our main branch inside of our repository. There's also a section for environment secrets. And this is really useful, perhaps, if you're trying to protect maybe a database key or a production key that's part of your deployment mechanism, right? That can only be accessed or ran if, for instance here, Dana goes ahead and approves this workload for us. All right, so now we've looked at a couple things about our environments. Let's actually go back here. And I'm actually going to see, hey, if Dana will be able to go ahead and make an approval for us to get into our production environment. Hopefully he's had time to check out and see the website, and maybe some of you have as well from the available URL that's here. All right, great timing, Daniel. It looks like here we can see in our events that it's just been approved for our production environment. And just as quickly, we can see, hey, this workflow job is now running. And went ahead and deployed up to our production instance, and now it's going to validate production just to make sure everything is looking good. I'm going to access this production URL. All right, and see, it looks like the same thing. So our web app is up. Our REST database is also connected. Go back and take a look here. And see production and staging are also up and running and active in our AKS cluster. Navigating back up here, let's actually take a look at our different environments here on the right-hand side. So here we see we have staging and production. They're both active. Once again, we can navigate here to see the history of different changes made. And we can navigate and see the most recent deployment that's been done as well. Once we get to our bake-off service, and we can see it's actually persisting that database information from earlier. Going back here to our code tab, we also create a release as part of that workflow run. And that was actually done about 7 minutes ago from GitHub Actions. The great thing when it comes to automating your workflows inside of GitHub is the GitHub action can actually be the context or the actor that does those sort of things, from moving a project card, as we saw earlier, or in this case, creating a release from us. I went and create a pre-release environment because once it's up and running, I actually want to go in there and make the manual change of pointing out that, hey, this is actually an official live release now. It's the latest release of this code with the assets that were published earlier. And this is the commit that's referring back to from the changes that we made. An additional thing to look at, and something that we were actually modifying earlier, is our packages and containers, right? Of course, those are such an important part of deployment and cloud native technologies nowadays. So GitHub gives you the option to host those locally. And when I was publishing things to the GHCR, the GitHub Container Registry, it was all being pointed right here. You can see your history of changes I've made. And that last publish was about 9 minutes ago, which I believe should line up about that 7 to 8 minutes it's been since our deployments began. We can actually see this container image. We can pull this down. You can actually see the history coming down with it's had as well. One really useful thing with GitHub container registry and packages is the fact that we can actually define different settings and access to this package right from our GitHub UI. So here from our package settings, we can see we can actually manage what repositories can access this package using GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions are so powerful for pulling down images, pushing images, right? So why not give other repos that you have context to inside your organization or just inside your namespace to use? So here we can see obviously the repo itself has permissions to write, upload, and download the package. Or we can change that to read for certain repositories I want to add one. I'm actually going to look at a previous repo that I have. Perhaps I want this repository to have read access to this because maybe they have some related CI/CD, or maybe we're publishing certain content for microservices even. Have all that permissioning local and part of GitHub itself. And we can see here, we also can see who's inheriting permissions to this. And these are my two members of my repos, Daniel and Phenomenal, an extra user account we have. And if you want to, you can also change the visibility of this, maybe a public or a private package. All right, scroll back up here, let's take a look at GitHub. So we've done a few things right. We've went ahead and created a Codespace environment, went ahead and edited, made changes that we actually turned to a pull request, used issue and ChatOps using the Teams integration point to see information and record and subscribe to different events occurring from deployments, action workflow runs, commits, and changes made. And we had accepted that and used our environments and approval mechanisms for my colleague Daniel to go ahead and approve that up and be sent up into our AKS cluster. Now let's go ahead and go back to our project tab. And let's actually take a look at this bag item. So we actually move this from in progress to actually we're moving this over to done. So let's go ahead and click in this. And right here from our UI, we can actually go ahead and just close this issue. Awesome. Now, one additional thing that's part of GitHub and something that we're actually currently a beta for, you may have seen, is this concept of GitHub issues next, if you will. So GitHub issues and projects have been super invaluable over the years for many companies and organizations and its users. We want to provide an option for people to take this to sort of the next level. And that's actually with our Issues Next initiative. What this will allow you to do is actually look at issues and project boards and actually create those cross repo and actually using different bespoke, possibly custom fields and items. We're actually taking a look here at a demo environment for how that would look like. So pulling this up, this is our new iteration of GitHub projects. Currently in beta, please go up and sign up for it. It's definitely available if you guys want to take a look and use case. And as part of that, we can actually see over here that we can actually create several types of views of this information. Board views as well, based on different parameters and values, as well as creating custom content, files, labels, and fields from a variety of different types, selectors, numbers, values, which really gives you the flexibility and the power to work the way you need to, right? And for your teams and for your processes. Currently in beta, but check out our GitHub blog because we're making some updates all the time about the progress here. And we'd love to get you guys in the beta and kind of see some of your reactions and some of the next steps about it. All right. And with that, sort of wrapping up our demo day for this Friday, September 10th. I'm James Hogg, GitHub Solutions Engineer. Really appreciate your time so far. We're going to stay here on chat for a few more minutes to answer any questions that people have had on the demo day, but hopefully you're able to learn some and see some content. And Daniel there in chat has shared out the demo repository where you can actually subscribe and fork this or use it for yourself as well. You can see some comments in here from Bart and Alan. Alan, I think this is for any user or organization that possibly wants to move different workflow processes up into GitHub Actions, right? Because everyone nowadays seems to be using containers or Kubernetes for something or another. So just point out, you have available marketplace actions you can leverage from Azure or other ecosystem providers. You can store and use your container images inside GitHub. And when it comes to just automating sort of that process of tracking items, issues, and projects, also do that in GitHub as well, using that automation issue forms we saw earlier at the top of the call. And so your comment here from Bart. Yeah, appreciate that. Hopefully that is more of a positive thing than anything else. But hopefully this and other demo days sessions that we do weekly will also pique your interest. So make sure you all subscribe and see some of those as well. Excellent. All right, everyone. Appreciate y'all's time this week. And we will see you guys next time. Do go ahead and click that QR code if you're interested in GitHub and want to see some more interesting features, activities, or possibly talk to some GitHub representatives about what that can mean for your enterprise or your organization.
Hey, James, I have one more thing to ask. There was an earlier question in regards to ChatOps. And I know that we're hearing terms like GitOps, ChatOps. There are a lot of ops that are being introduced today. You want to kind of close on maybe a note, just kind of giving a brief explainer when it comes to those concepts? I know we talked about using teams and GitHub comments in order to do things on our pipeline.
Yeah, no, great point, Daniel. That's exactly right? Issue ops, chat ops, infrastructure as code. So many things are there and available. It really comes down to where's your source control, where's your code living, and how do you want to actually automate your different environments, right? So chat ops doesn't have to be just about GitHub. It can be about a lot of things like Azure or different environments. I think the big key in it is, do you have bots or some automation as part of maybe your different services, whether it be Slack or Teams, to maybe generate a new dev environment or create a new test repo or make a new repo template? Or in our case here, it's actually generating a dev environment from GitHub itself based on that subscription event. So here we're actually using GitHub to kind of cut through that middleman of logic, because instead of having a bot in there specific that's listening to keywords and doing some backend API activity, we're just going to GitHub Actions to that for us as well. And there's plenty of different examples of this being done with GitHub or with other tools you want to integrate with. But I think that's really going to be a next evolution, just making people more productive. Because when you can cut the middleman out of requesting for an environment, it's just a simple chat command, like how we do here at GitHub ourselves. We see that greatly increases productivity of teams and users.
Yeah, and Alan, I definitely echo your sentiment that there are so many ops, and the emphasis that I think James was getting at is, the ops are there, or the chat bots are there just to have another avenue in order to be productive is the ultimate goal.
All right. Well, really appreciate everyone. This will be available on YouTube as a recording later on today or tomorrow. So we'll look forward to any questions, comments, or further activity there. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, and other sources to get updates on future demo day sessions. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day and a good weekend.